Wars are won with swords. That is what they always thought in Westeros. Kings raised armies, lords forged armor, knights swore oaths. But behind the scenes of every war, behind every crown, behind every throne, stood a power that didn't have a single soldier. Only numbers in account books. And yet, it was this power that decided who would win, always. The Bank of Braavos never fought in a single war. It simply financed the side that was destined to win. And when the chosen side lost, it revised its bets. Today, we will explore how 23 runaway slaves from a mine built an organization before which those who had dragons bowed. To understand the Iron Bank, one must first understand Braavos. Not just as a beautiful city on a lagoon whose canals remember Arya Stark. Braavos as an idea, as an experiment that had almost no equal in world history. 500 years before Aegon's conquest, a group of slaves staged a revolt right in the middle of the sea. They were being transported from Valyria to a new colony in the south. They slaughtered the guards, seized the ships, and turned north. They were led by moon singers, priestesses from the Jogos Nai. They said they had seen in their dreams a place where no one could find them. A misty lagoon, hidden by hills and pines, invisible to dragon riders. They named it their city. The first law of Braavos, carved into the arch of the Long Canal, states, "No one in this city shall be a slave, a thrall, or a bondman, ever." This is not just a rule, it is the fundamental DNA of the city, suffered for by people who knew what a whip was, what a brand was, and what it meant to be someone's property. The city was not founded by generals or kings. It was founded by people who had nothing but despair and a will for freedom. For over 100 years, Braavos hid. Ships went out to sea with forged charts and lied about their home port. When Tytos the Blind finally revealed the city to the world in the 111th year of its existence, the Valyrian freehold was already gone. The doom had happened. The very dragon lords from whom the founders had fled had burned in a single day. The Iron Bank paid compensation to the grandchildren of the owners of the stolen ships, but not for the value of the slaves themselves. This principle also became part of the bank's DNA. Debts on property are repaid. Debts to people are not recognized. It was from this environment that the Iron Bank grew, and it is important to understand this because most viewers perceive it as just a very wealthy organization. In reality, it is something entirely different. In the very beginning, it was not even an idea, but a practical necessity. Among the runaway slaves were people of different origins, different traditions, and different cultures. When some of them began to achieve success in trade, the question arose where to hide their valuables. Theft and trade rivalries were brutal. They found a simple and ingenious solution: pool their resources. 23 people, 16 men and 7 women, found an abandoned iron mine on the edge of the city. They sealed it with a gate. They set guards, each of whom watched both the gate and the other guards. Each of the 23 received a key. That is why they are called the key holders. Their descendants today number over 1,000, and all of them proudly wear ceremonial keys at official ceremonies. They are no longer functional, just a symbol of belonging to the founders. Some families have long since lost their fortunes and influence, but they keep the keys as their greatest treasure. Because a key here does not mean access to gold. A key means, my ancestors built this. Some families have long since lost their fortunes and influence, but they keep the keys as their greatest treasure. Because a key here does not mean access to gold. A key means, my ancestors built this. Note one detail. Among the 23 founders were 7 women.
In a world where women's rights in most societies were strictly limited, where they could not own property, could not engage in trade, could not make legally binding decisions, 7 women among the 23 founders of the world's largest bank. This is another stroke in the portrait of Braavos as a truly different society, a city built on principles that the rest of the world would declare a utopia.
When the mine chambers filled with valuables, an obvious opportunity arose. The valuables were lying dead. They could be put to work. The most successful Braavosi merchants began to give loans to those who were just starting to rise, for interest, of course. Thus was born the Iron Bank, not as a financial institution in our understanding, but as mutual aid for a community of runaway people who decided that helping each other was more profitable than sinking. Braavos began to grow rich at an incredible speed. Trade, the production of dyes from Braavosi sea snails, fishing, and later, shipping routes across the entire known world. The purple sails of Braavosi ships were seen off the shores of Ashai, on the Jade Sea, in every port of Essos. And with every new trade route, the Iron Bank grew. Because trade is impossible without credit, and credit is impossible without reputation. The reputation of the Iron Bank could be summarized in 4 words. The Iron Bank will have its due. Long before most of us were introduced to this story through Ned Stark and Tyrion Lannister, the Iron Bank had already played a role in several important episodes of Westerosi history. And to understand them collectively is to understand exactly how the mechanism of this organization works. In the 41st year after the conquest, envoys of the bank first appeared in Old Town at a meeting with Lord Martin Hightower. This was the first official visit to Westeros. Shortly before this, Rhaego Draz, Master of Coin to King Jaehaerys I, had taken a loan from the bank. By the way, that story is interesting for its finale. Sometime later, the Seal Lord of Braavos personally asked the bank to forgive the principal amount of Rhaego's debt in exchange for other arrangements. The bank, in the end, agreed, which in itself speaks to the flexibility of the organization when it is profitable. Then came the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen civil war that split the 7 kingdoms in half. Sir Tyland Lannister, acting for the Greens, transferred a quarter of the gold from the royal treasury to the Iron Bank for safekeeping. The decision looks strange from the outside, hiding money with a foreign banker in the middle of a civil war, but in reality, it demonstrates the degree of trust in the bank. If gold is stored in Braavos, it will not be seized by the winners of the war, whoever wins. The Iron Bank acted as a neutral vault, an inviolable storehouse for those who were not sure of the outcome of the conflict. And this is where something truly interesting begins, because it was in that era that the Iron Bank encountered the only serious competitor in its history, and how it dealt with that competitor explains a lot. It was called the Lysine Spring, a period of the regency of Aegon III, when representatives of the Rhaegar banking house from Lys came to court. Lara Rhaegar married Prince Viserys Targaryen. Her father, Lysandro the Magnificent, was proclaimed First Magister of Lys for life. And in a few years, the Rhaegar Bank grew to a size that, for the first time in history, eclipsed the Iron Bank. For the first time. The only time. Then Lysandro died. His brother Drazenko died literally the next day. One choked on bacon, the other drowned when his barge sank, on the same day. Sometime later, the Rhaegar Bank collapsed. The next heir turned out to be an incompetent spendthrift. A flight of depositors began, and its reputation was destroyed. The entire family either died or was ruined. Among the many versions of what happened, one is particularly popular, not necessarily because it is the most truthful, but because it is the most logical. In Braavos lived the Faceless Men. In Braavos lived the Iron Bank. Both occupied the underground mines beneath the city. Both grew from the original community of runaway slaves, and when the only competitor in history began to threaten the bank's monopoly, the competitor suddenly experienced very significant personnel losses.
This is not canon. There is no direct evidence, but Martin himself leaves this version open, and that, as a rule, means something. In any case, after the Lycene Spring, the Iron Bank remained the undisputed leader of the global financial system, forever. No other bank has even come close to its level. And for the next century and a half, the bank methodically built relationships with the Iron Throne, relationships that eventually led to the point we see at the beginning of Game of Thrones.
Let's talk about that point. When Ned Stark sat down for his first small council meeting in King's Landing, he was informed of the sum: 6 million gold dragons of debt. Of that, 3 million were owed to the Lannisters, about 2 million combined to the Iron Bank, the Tyrells, and the trade cartels of Tyrosh, and almost another million to the Faith of the Seven. Ned was shocked. He thought he had become the hand of the wealthiest kingdom in the world. Instead, he turned out to be the chief credit officer of a deeply indebted corporation. Who accumulated this debt? Robert Baratheon. Tournaments, feasts, hunting, a lifestyle. But one specific person was digging the hole beneath that lifestyle: Littlefinger. Petyr Baelish, in his role as Master of Coin, did the same thing over and over. He took out loans, used them to cover the budget deficit, and the next year took out new loans to service the old ones. The crown lived on credit. At the same time, from the outside, everything looked brilliant. Littlefinger knew how to create the appearance of prosperity, and only people who knew how to read the numbers understood what was actually happening.
Tyrion knew how to read the numbers. That is why, upon taking the position of Master of Coin after Littlefinger, the first thing he did was study the account books and say aloud what others preferred to keep silent about. If they did not repay the debt to the Iron Bank, the bank would begin to finance their enemies. This is not a threat. This is a mechanism, described in documents, set in contracts, and tested in practice for generations. It is important to pause here and understand what this phrase actually means, because the series version sometimes interprets it too simplistically, as a threat from an offended creditor. In reality, it is much more subtle and much more terrifying.
The Iron Bank's principle isn't about revenge, it's about mathematics. The bank lends money to those capable of repaying their debt. The King of Westeros is an interesting borrower, not because he wears a fancy crown, but because he has a tax base, trade routes, and resources. As long as all that is functioning and the money is being repaid, the bank is satisfied. But if a borrower suddenly stops paying, what happens? The mechanism works like this. The bank starts creating problems for that borrower on several levels simultaneously. First, it recalls all loans from Westerosi debtors immediately, triggering an economic crisis in the kingdom. Second, it refuses new loans, depriving the crown of operating capital for its army and administration. Third, it finds an alternative candidate who has a better chance of winning and finances them. Not because this candidate is better or more honest, but because if they win, they will inherit the predecessor's debt and, most likely, will want to start their relationship with the bank with a clean slate. In the books, this mechanism is shown in much greater detail than in the show. In A Feast for Crows, Noho Demidus, an envoy of the bank, comes to Cersei and politely reminds her of the debt. Cersei, in her characteristic manner, replies that she will pay when the wars are over. That is the point of no return. After that, the bank sets the whole chain in motion. Economic chaos in Westeros, parallel negotiations with Stannis, and a future bill for Harys Swift and Mace Tyrell, who will be sent to back the bank to reconsider the terms only when it is already too late. In the show, all of this was simplified. Stannis and Davos sail to Braavos and convince the bankers with a moving speech about a dying Tywin. In the books, Tycho Nestoris sails to the wall himself because the bank has already made its decision. He doesn't go to hear Stannis's arguments, he goes to finalize a contract with the person the bank has already chosen. The difference is fundamental. The show creates the illusion that Davos turned the situation around with his speech. In the books, the bank acted like an automated system whose mechanism was triggered the moment Cersei refused to pay.
And one more detail from the book version that the show omitted. While Tycho Nestoris is waiting at the wall, while he is searching for Stannis, he meets Jon Snow. And Jon takes a loan from him, not for Stannis, for the Night's Watch, for provisions, to replenish supplies before winter. Nestoris agrees, because from the bank's perspective, investing in the survival of the men standing on the wall is insurance for the entire world. If the Night's Watch falls, the bank will have no clients left either. It is the only loan in the history of this organization motivated not by profit, but by survival. And if that isn't a commentary on the nature of the threat from the north, then what is? Furthermore, Tycho tells Jon something alarming. Strange ships have been spotted near the Stepstones. They don't belong to Salador Saan or the Red Wines. They came from somewhere in the east. Nestoris adds, and there is strange talk of dragons. Jon tries to brush it off with a joke. Tycho replies in all seriousness. He does not joke about this subject because his people fled from the Dragon Lords. This small scene says more about Braavos and the Iron Bank than several pages of direct description.
Now, let's talk about the Faceless Men, because you can't talk about the Iron Bank without touching on that. Officially, the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men are not connected. Martin has never stated this directly, but he has scattered so many hints throughout the text that even skeptical researchers are forced to admit a connection existed. Perhaps it still does. Both institutions grew from the same place. Braavos was founded by runaway slaves, and it was among them that the cult of the many-faced god first appeared. Legend says the first faceless men were slaves in Valyrian mines who prayed for death as a release. The Iron Bank grew from those same mines, just in a different sense. Both have roots in the abandoned iron mines beneath the city. In the books, the description of the underground chambers of the House of Black and White is strikingly similar to the description of the Iron Bank's vaults. Several researchers point to this not as a coincidence, but as a direct link. As for practice, when the Rogair Bank began to threaten the Iron Bank's monopoly, the heads of the competing bank died on the same day under strange circumstances. The World of Ice and Fire carefully notes, some suspected the Braavosi bankers of hiring faceless men. Martin neither confirms nor denies it. He simply leaves it there, like a booby-trapped detail. It fits practical logic perfectly. The Iron Bank is the world's largest financial organization. The Faceless Men are the most expensive assassination service. Both organizations are based in the same city, and both grew from the same historical layer. The bank regularly encounters people it would be convenient to eliminate. The Faceless Men regularly look for solvent clients. It is hard to imagine that they exist in complete isolation from one another. But here is what is important to understand about both organizations. If this connection exists, it doesn't make either of them a villainous structure in the traditional sense. The Faceless Men follow their philosophy. The Iron Bank follows its mathematics. Both act within the framework of their own value systems, and that is exactly what makes them so terrifying. Let's return to the main plot. The War of the Five Kings. The Lannisters control the Iron Throne through young Joffrey, then through Tommen. Tywin Lannister manages it all with an iron fist. As long as Tywin is alive, the Iron Bank somehow holds off. The old lion understood. Debts must be serviced. Of course he grumbled. Of course he considered the Braavosi bankers bores. But Tywin had the professional caution of a financier. He understood that the reputation of a reliable debtor is worth more than the money one wants to keep right now.
After Tywin, Cersei was left one-on-one with a system she understood far less. She saw threats where there were business partners. She saw enemies where there were neutral intermediaries. Her logic regarding the Iron Bank was roughly as follows: we aren't paying now because there are wars. When the wars end, we will pay. That would sound reasonable if the bank hadn't heard the same thing from hundreds of debtors over several centuries, and if it didn't have a well-oiled protocol for this exact case.
Noho Damides comes to Cersei. She says, "A Lannister always pays his debts." Pycelle reminds her, "The Braavosi have a saying too." Cersei pretends not to hear. And here is an interesting moment that the book version shows in much greater detail. Pycelle tries to warn her. He is one of the few advisors who understands who he is dealing with. He tries to explain gently and cautiously in his helpless manner, "This is not an ordinary creditor. This is not a duke you can make promises to and then forget." Cersei doesn't hear him. This is one of many moments where her arrogance is not a strength, but a weakness. She confuses the loyalty of her supporters with the reliability of institutions. The bank is loyal to no one. It simply calculates. The very scenario we already analyzed unfolds. The bank demands immediate repayment from all Westerosi debtors. The economy begins to crumble. Merchants come to Cersei with panicked faces. And at one point, Cersei seriously considers the idea of founding her own Golden Bank of the Lannisters. This is one of the best characterizations of Cersei in the text, not because she is stupid, but because she truly believed that one could build a new system on top of the old one, not understanding that the Iron Bank is held together not by a brand, but by 200 years of reputation and a network of connections across the entire known world. Here, it is necessary to make a fundamental distinction between the book and show versions because it changes a great deal in understanding just how terrifying the bank actually is. In the show, in the 7th season, Cersei takes Highgarden, takes the Tyrell gold, pays off the Iron Bank, and negotiates a new loan to hire the Golden Company. Tycho Nestoris leaves satisfied. The story is finished. In the books, we are much earlier than that point. The bank has already switched to Stannis. Harys Swift is going to beg Braavos to reconsider the terms. Kevin Lannister, before his death, says that the main task after murdering Cersei as regent is first and foremost to deal with the bank. Because, quoting the logic of its protocol, if they cannot collect money from other European banks, they will be forced to pay from the Lannisters' personal gold. And the gold mines of Casterly Rock ran dry 3 years ago. This is a circumstance Tywin hid from everyone. The Lannisters, who always pay their debts, at the time of A Feast for Crows, physically do not have the gold with which those debts can be paid. In the show, Cersei saves herself through the robbery of the Tyrells. It is a logical solution for the show's mechanics, but it very neatly removes one of the most interesting unresolved questions of the book. What will happen when the bank completely loses its patience and the Lannisters have neither gold nor a way to collect the debt? Let's talk about parallels, because Martin rarely invents anything from scratch. He takes real history and translates it into a new context with enough changes to make the story breathe. The Medici, a Florentine banking family that, in the 15th century, controlled the finances of the Papal See, several European monarchies, and effectively ruled Florence without officially holding any post. Cosimo de' Medici ruled from the shadows, using debt obligations as a tool of political influence. His family financed wars, coronations, and the construction of cathedrals. The Medici were exactly what the Iron Bank represents in the Westerosi story, a private organization that was more powerful than many official authorities. The parallel with Braavos, which reminds researchers more of Venice, is obvious, but the financial mechanics of the Iron Bank are closer to the Medici. The Templars,
a knightly order that created the first international system of bank transfers in medieval Europe. A pilgrim could deposit money in London and withdraw it in Jerusalem using a letter of credit. The Templars financed monarchs across Europe. The French treasury was literally kept in their commandery in Paris. In the end, King Philip IV of France, who owed the order huge sums, fabricated charges of heresy, succeeded in having them dissolved, and confiscated their property. The Templars, like the Iron Bank in the story of the Rogares, knew what it meant to be too convenient for those who want to get rid of their debts. The difference is that the Templars didn't survive it, while the Iron Bank, by all appearances, has survived everything. The Rothschilds. The banking family that, in the 19th century, financed both sides of the Napoleonic Wars simultaneously. When the fate of Europe was being decided at Waterloo, the Rothschilds had agents on both sides of the battlefield. They simply recorded information faster than it could reach the stock exchanges and used it to their advantage. Not because they were villains, simply because they had their own mathematics. The Iron Bank operates on exactly this principle. There are no right or wrong sides. There are only reliable debtors and unreliable debtors. Entire eras have sometimes become unreliable debtors. This is important to understand in the context of the bank's relationship with Westeros over hundreds of years. In the year 267 AC, back under the Mad King Aerys, the Iron Throne had a conflict with Braavos over debts inherited from Jaehaerys II. Aerys considered expanding the royal fleet to challenge the Titan of Braavos. Translated from mad to sane, he was thinking about a military confrontation with a city that had a war fleet, international allies, and the Iron Bank. It led to nothing, because being mad doesn't mean being a complete suicide. Even Aerys understood that a war with Braavos with such a debt would end badly. In the year 1350 AC, Cragen Stark borrowed a huge sum from the bank to feed the Northmen. In the year 41 AC, the first envoys appeared in Old Town. The bank had a constant presence in Westerosi politics long before Littlefinger created a situation where it became the primary creditor. But it was Littlefinger who took the debt to another level, 6 million gold dragons. Of that, 2 million directly to the Iron Bank, with the rest distributed among other creditors. And this is despite the fact that the bank itself is described in those same books as an organization richer than any other in the known world. All the other banks of the Free Cities combined are less wealthy. 2 million gold dragons is not a catastrophe for a player of that caliber. The problem isn't the sum. The problem is the precedent. If one major debtor doesn't pay without consequence, others start to think they can do the same. The reputation of the Iron Bank rests on one thing: it always gets its due, without a single exception. The first exception would destroy everything. Now let's break down what most viewers don't notice, a few details that change the understanding of this story. The first detail, Tycho Nestoris and Jon Snow. In the books, the envoy of the Iron Bank arrives at the Wall not just to negotiate with Stannis. He meets with Jon Snow and negotiates a loan for the Night's Watch to purchase provisions before winter. Look at what is happening here. The bank gives money to the men on the Wall, men who stand at the edge of the world and face the others. From a purely financial point of view, the Night's Watch looks like a catastrophic borrower. They have nothing: no land, no trade routes, no production. Why does the bank agree? Because Tycho Nestoris understands, if the Night's Watch falls, the others will enter Westeros. If Westeros turns into an icy wasteland, the Iron Bank will lose all its clients at once. Investing in the survival of the Night's Watch is simply business insurance. The second detail, the Braavosi attitude toward the Dragon Lords. Tycho says directly to Jon, "Do not joke about dragons. My ancestors fled from the Dragon Lords." Braavos was founded by people who survived that system. When dragons appear in Essos again under the control of an heir to an old house, for the bank, this is not just a political issue, it is existential.
On one hand, Daenerys is destroying slavery, which sounds good for a city founded by runaway slaves. On the other hand, she is from the house that created and maintained that slavery. The books do not yet answer how the bank will deal with Daenerys, but the question stands. The third detail, the bank's symbol. 2 gold triangles crossed like an hourglass, with 2 hands, palms up. An hourglass. Time always runs out. Hands, palms up, we bring and we receive. This is not a symbol of greed, it is a symbol of inevitability. Time passes, the debt grows, the bank waits. Sooner or later, everyone comes with palms up.
Now to what is often overlooked when analyzing the Iron Bank as a purely Westerosi problem. There is one fundamental thing that distinguishes the bank from any army, any dragon, or any political force in this world. Armies need soldiers who die. Dragons are born and perish. Kings grow old, go mad, and kill each other. The Iron Bank does not die. It does not get sick. It does not betray. It does not fall in love. It does not go mad. Tywin Lannister, the most cautious politician of his generation, died on the privy from a bolt fired by his own son. The next day, the Iron Bank came to the one who took his place and returned the conversation to exactly where it had been interrupted. No malice, no triumph, just an entry in a ledger. This is exactly what makes it scarier than the Mad King with his wildfire, scarier than Tywin with his tactical genius, scarier, if you will, than dragons. Because a dragon lives for a few centuries and then dies. But the bank has been keeping records for 500 years and has no intention of stopping. Money turns time into an ally. If you are in no hurry, you can simply wait. The debt with interest grows. The political situation changes. One day, the moment arrives when the debtor finds themselves in a position where it is more profitable to pay than to continue not paying, and the bank simply waits patiently for that moment. Robb Stark won every battle. He had an army, strategic genius, and northern loyalty. But the Lannister gold mines and the unlimited credit of the Iron Bank financed Tywin day after day, year after year, while Robb ran out of provisions and allies. This is not symbolism. This is literally how war works. The winner is not the one who is stronger in a single battle, but the one who has more resources over the long haul. There is one question that is asked less often than it should be. Namely, is this a good organization or a bad one? Here it is useful to return to the origins. Braavos was founded by people who fled slavery. The first law of the city forbids slavery forever. The Iron Bank grew out of the community of these people. In its DNA, the same thing is embedded. There are debts that must be paid, and there are debts that cannot be paid. The bank paid compensation to the grandchildren of the owners of stolen ships, but it refused to pay for the cost of the slaves themselves, because people are not a cost, because human dignity is not a line in a spreadsheet. This is a principled position for an organization that, on the whole, deals in a rather cold business. At the same time, when Braavos became particularly influential in the past, the city used its military and economic power to force other states to abandon slavery. For example, Pentos signed a treaty with Braavos prohibiting slavery, including under economic pressure. It is not a pacifist organization nor a charitable foundation, but it has values. They are not declared loudly, but they can be traced in its actions. Tycho Nestoris says to Cersei directly in the show, the bank received large profits from the slave trade that Daenerys destroyed. This is an honest admission. The bank made money in that market. It does not claim moral perfection itself, but it exists in a system it did not create and acts within it according to its own rules. Perhaps the closest analogy is neither a bank nor an army. Perhaps the Iron Bank, in the best sense, resembles a very strict accountant of history. It records everything, forgives nothing, and in the end is always right. What happens next? In the books, the story of the Iron Bank is not finished. Stannis signed a treaty. Harris Swift is going to plead. Kevin Lannister is dead. Cersei is regent again. The Iron Throne is balancing on the edge of several simultaneous crises. And somewhere on the horizon, Daenerys is sailing to Westeros with 3 dragons and an army of many thousands. How will the Iron Bank treat Daenerys? This is one of the most interesting open questions. They are already owed. She is destroying slavery throughout Essos, and the bank historically dealt with slave traders. She is from the house that originally enslaved the ancestors of the founders of Braavos. But she is a real political force with an army and dragons. And the bank has one unchanging criterion: who is a reliable debtor? If Daenerys becomes queen of Westeros and starts paying back the debts, the bank will be satisfied. If not, the protocol will be triggered. It doesn't matter that she has 3 dragons. This is not the first time the bank has dealt with the legacy of Valyria.
As for the book finale, which we do not yet know, one can make a cautious assumption. The Iron Bank will be neither a winner nor a loser. It will simply continue to work. The Lannisters will survive, the Targaryens will survive, the White Walkers will come and go, but somewhere in Braavos, in underground vaults, the ledgers will lie, and in them it will be recorded who owes what to whom. The common thread that runs through this entire story is striking in its simplicity. Runaway slaves from Valyria built a free city. For this city to survive, they needed money. For money to work, they needed a reputation. For a reputation to hold, one rule was needed: the Iron Bank gets its due, always, without exceptions. For 500 years, this machine has worked without serious failures. The Rogar Bank rose and fell. The Templars in real history rose and fell. The Medici rose and fell. The Iron Bank stands. Not because it has an evil genius at the helm, but because it has a procedure. Clear, unchanging, the same for everyone. Whether you are a king or a beggar, whether you have a dragon or infantry, it doesn't matter. The debt is recorded in the book. Interest is accrued. The deadline will come.
Pycelle told Cersei correctly. The Lannisters say, a Lannister always pays his debts. Braavos has a saying too: the Iron Bank gets its due. And unlike the phrase about Lannister debts, which quite quickly turned out to be empty words by the end of the 6th season, the Braavosi proverb has not found a single refutation in 500 years. Swords rust, dragons die, kings go mad, but the numbers in the ledgers remain. If you want to know who really rules Westeros, don't look at the one wearing the crown. Look at the one holding the Book of Debts. Most likely, that is exactly where you will find true power. Write in the comments, whose side do you think the Iron Bank will take in the finale of the book saga? And subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.